Amaka, whose child are you carrying? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I swear, I have never been with any man. That was how it started. In a small village where everybody knew each other, a girl became pregnant and no one could explain how. At first, people thought it was a lie until they saw her stomach. And that was when fear entered the village. Because what Amaka was carrying was not just a mystery. It was something that would later destroy everything. This is the story of how a girl carried a pregnancy no one could explain, and how the truth behind it destroyed the entire village. In a quiet village surrounded by tall palm trees and wide farmlands, there lived a young girl who knew nothing but love. Her name was Amaka. She was not from a rich home. Her father was just a simple farmer, and after her mother died, he married another woman who became Amaka's stepmother. Life was not always easy for her in that house, but even with that, Amaka was still known as a good girl. If you sent her on an errand, she would do it well. If an elder called her, she would answer with respect. She did not move with boys. She did not follow bad friends. People in the village trusted her. Some women would even point at her when correcting their daughters. Look at Amaka, they would say. Be like her. That was the kind of life she was living before everything changed. It did not change all of a sudden. It started small, in a way that nobody even noticed. Amaka began to feel tired more than usual. Not the kind of tiredness from working in the farm or fetching water, but something that would come even when she had not done much. At first, she ignored it. She thought maybe her body just needed rest. But after some days, she started noticing something else. There were moments she would sit down quietly and she would feel a slight movement inside her stomach. Not pain, just a movement she could not explain. The first time it happened, she did not take it seriously. She thought maybe it was hunger. But as days passed, it kept happening. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes at night when she was lying down. That was when she started becoming uncomfortable. She did not understand what it was, and she could not explain it to anyone, so she kept it to herself. One evening, after returning from the stream, Amaka dropped the water pot in the compound and sat down to rest. She was tired that day. She placed her hand on her stomach without thinking. Then she felt a clear movement. This time it was so real. Something that made her pause. She quickly removed her hand and sat up straight. She did not say anything at first. She just sat there, quiet, trying to understand what she had just felt. After a few seconds, she placed her hand there again, slowly, then felt another movement. That was when fear entered her. Amaka stood up immediately and went inside the hut. She looked around as if there was something she was supposed to see or understand, but there was nothing. She sat down again. This time, she did not touch her stomach. She just stayed there, thinking. From that day, she became more aware of her body. She started paying attention to every little thing. And then she began to notice another change. Her stomach was no longer the same. It was not obvious at first. Nobody would see it by just looking at her, but she could feel it, becoming slowly firm and increasing in size. That was when the fear became real, because now it was no longer something she could ignore. But the truth remains that Amaka had never been with any man. She knew her life. She knew herself. So whatever was happening did not make sense. She tried to act normal. She continued her daily walk, She went to the stream, she helped in the house, she greeted people like she always did. But inside her, she was no longer at peace. That night, she could not sleep well. She kept turning on her mat, thinking about everything she had noticed. At some point, she sat up and held her stomach again. The movement was still happening. That was when she decided to step outside for fresh air. The village was quiet. Most people were already asleep. She walked a few steps away from the hut and stood there. Not long after, two women who were returning late from the stream passed by the compound. They saw her and stopped. "Amaka, what are you doing outside at this time?" one of them asked. Amaka turned to answer them. As she did, the wrapper she tied around her waist shifted a little. That was when the women noticed her stomach size. They looked at her stomach and their faces changed immediately. They moved closer, trying to be sure of what they were seeing. "Amaka," one of them said slowly, "come here." She stepped forward. The two women looked at each other. "What is this?" the other one asked. Amaka shook her head. "I don't know," she said quietly. But the women were no longer calm. One of them picked a pot quickly, murmured something to the other one. Before Amaka could say anything more, they had already started walking away, talking in low voices. Now, in the village of Amaka, pregnancy out of wedlock is seen as an abomination. By the following morning, rumors had already gone round the village. Nobody knew who started it first, but everybody heard it that Amaka the good girl is pregnant. People did not even wait to confirm it. They did not ask her, they did not ask her father, they just believed what they heard and began to talk. Even at the stream, women gathered in small groups, gossiping in low voices. "I saw her myself last night," one of the women said. "Her stomach has come out." "But how?" another asked. "That girl does not move with men." "That is why this one is not ordinary," the first woman replied. In the market, it was the same thing. Traders left what they were selling and leaned closer to each other, discussing about Amaka. "Something is wrong somewhere," one man said. "That kind of thing does not just happen," another said. As the sun rose higher, the talk became louder. Children started repeating what they heard from their parents. Some even ran towards Amaka's house just to see her. Before noon, it was no longer a rumor. It had become a problem. Inside the house, Amaka was not aware of how far the story had gone. She was sitting quietly in one corner, trying to make sense of everything that had happened the night before. Her mind was not settled. She had not even finished thinking when her stepmother pushed the door open and entered. The woman's face was already hard. "Amaka," she called. Amaka stood up quickly. "Yes, Mama." The woman walked closer and looked at her from head to toe. "Come outside," she said. There was something in her voice that made Amaka's heart beat faster. She followed her out. When they walked outside, there were already few neighbors standing, pretending as if they were just passing by. But their eyes were fixed on her. Her stepmother turned to face her fully. "Lift your wrapper," she said. Amaka did not understand at first. "Mama?" "I said lift it," the woman shouted. Her voice was sharp enough to draw more attention. Amaka hesitated, then slowly adjusted her wrapper. The moment her stomach became visible, people around started murmuring. "Look at it. It is true. I told you." Her stepmother stepped back as if she had seen something dangerous. "What is this?" she demanded. Amaka shook her head slowly. "I don't know, Mama." A slap landed on her face before she could say anything more. "Don't lie to me," the woman shouted. Amaka held her cheek, tears already forming in her eyes. "I am not lying," she said. "I don't know how it happened." The woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So you want to tell me you are carrying a child and you don't know the man responsible?" Amaka did not answer. Not because she did not want to, but because she had no answer to give. The small crowd around them grew bigger. People were no longer pretending to pass by. They had stopped completely. One woman spoke from behind. "This is not a normal thing," she said. Another added, "That girl has been hiding something." Amaka looked around. These were people she greeted every day. People who used to smile at her. Now their faces were different, cold, careful, afraid. Her stepmother pointed at her. "You have brought shame to this house," she said, "after everything we have done for you." Amaka's father was not around. He had gone to the farm early that morning, so there was no one to speak for her, no one to count the situation. "Tell us the truth," the stepmother continued. "Who is responsible?" Amaka shook her head again. "I don't know," she repeated. This time, her voice was weaker. The murmuring grew louder. "If she cannot talk, then something is wrong," an old woman said. "Very wrong," another replied. Amaka felt it again at that moment, a movement inside her stomach. She froze. Her hand moved there without thinking. The crowd noticed. Some people stepped back immediately. "Did you see that?" someone whispered. Her stepmother noticed it too. She moved away from Amaka slowly. "Stay there," she said. Nobody went close to her again. They just stood at a distance, watching her like something they did not understand. By evening, the whole village had made up their mind. Nobody needed proof anymore. Nobody wanted explanation. Amaka was no longer just a girl with a problem. She had become something else in their eyes. And from that moment, her name no longer sounded the same when people called it. By the next morning, the village of Umoka was alive with surprise and gossips. The elders had been called together to discuss what could be seen as a possible abomination. The sound of drums echoed across the fields, summoning everyone to the village square. Men left their farms, women abandoned chores, children ran alongside them. Nobody wanted to miss what was about to happen. Amaka did not understand what was going on at first. She had been sitting quietly in her corner under the mango tree in their compound when some men with strong hands grabbed her arms. "Amaka," one of the elders shouted, "come with us." She tried to pull away, but they were too strong. She walked with them, her feet dragging through the dust. As she approached the village square, the crowd parted. Hundreds of eyes stared at her. She looked around. People she had grown up with, neighbors, friends, traders from the market, all staring directly at her. Murmurs began to spread. "That girl carries a curse. Look at her stomach." The elders raised their hands for silence. Their faces were grim, their eyes cold. "Amaka," Elder Okonkwo said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "you stand accused of bringing shame upon this village. A child has come into your womb without a father. Speak the truth." Amaka swallowed hard. Her throat was dry. She looked around for her father, but he was not there. Her stepmother stood behind her, arms crossed, her face twisted with anger and fear. I don't know," Amaka said quietly. The words barely left her lips before a woman shouted, "Lies! She knows something." Another voice called, "It is a spirit, a curse from the birds." People nodded, pointing fingers. Some took a step back, afraid to be near her. Others leaned forward, hungry for more drama. Amaka tried to explain again. "I have never been with a man. I don't know how this happened." Her voice cracked. Tears ran down her cheeks, but nobody reached out to comfort her. Not a single hand, not a single word of understanding. The elders murmured among themselves. Mama and Kem looked at her sharply. "This is an abomination. We must act before the village faces the consequences." Amaka's stomach tightened. She could feel the movement again, stronger now. She pressed her hands against it instinctively. The crowd noticed. Gasps filled the square. Amaka's legs shook. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. She stood there trembling, holding herself together the only way she could. From that moment, something changed in the eyes of the villagers. She was no longer Amaka, the kind, quiet girl who worked in the farms and helped her neighbors. She had become something else, something dangerous, something to fear. The elders turned to the crowd. "People of Umuoka, decide what must be done," Elder Okonkwa said. And in that instant, Amaka realized that nobody would ever look at her the same way again. The girl they had known was gone. In her place was the accused, the cursed, the one the village feared. And the fear, it would only grow from here.
Even as the villagers gathered to accuse her, even as their voices rose with fear and anger, there was one person who watched quietly. He was a young man named Chike. He had grown up in the village like everyone else, but unlike the rest, he did not see Amaka as cursed. He saw her as the same kind girl he had known since they were children. As he stood at the edge of the crowd, he noticed things others did not. The elders were nervous. Their hands shook when certain names were mentioned. They avoided looking at each other at times as if they had secrets to hide. Chike could not put his finger on it, but he felt that something was wrong beyond Amaka's body. Something the villagers could not see yet. That night, when everyone had gone home, Amaka lay on her mat. Her body still felt the strange movements, but it was more than that now. She could hear whispers. At first, she thought it was the wind. Then she realized the voice was calling her name softly. Amaka. Her heart jumped. She sat up and asked, "Who are you?" No answer, only silence, but the air felt heavy, like someone was there, just out of sight. Night after night, it happened the same way. The whispers came, soft at first, then louder. She began to dread the nights. Meanwhile, Chike started asking questions quietly. He went to the village elders, pretending to seek guidance, but he watched their reactions closely. Every question about Amaka's condition or about past events made them uncomfortable. One of the oldest elders, Elder Jonah, would lower his eyes and shake slightly whenever Chike asked about the time before Amaka's mother died. Chike began to sense something fishy. The village's fear of Amaka was not just about her. Something had happened before, something no one has ever spoken about, something only the oldies talk about in secret. Amaka noticed the change in people too. Some neighbors who used to admire her began looking at her differently. One night, while sitting under the mango tree, "Why me?" she said to herself, hugging herself tightly. She was so confused as to how she could be pregnant without knowing any man. Dear viewers, what do you think would have led to Amaka being pregnant? Could it be a curse? Or did someone take advantage of her without her knowing? Continue watching while we uncover secrets that will make your jaw drop. Few weeks after Amaka was summoned to the village square, strange things began to happen in Umuoka. The first sign came from the farms. Crops that had grown well the previous year began to fail. Cassava leaves curled and dried. Maize stalks bent and broke without wind. Yams rotted in the ground before anyone could dig them up. Farmers shook their heads in disbelief. "This has never happened before," one man said. "Calamity has befall us." Women carrying baskets of food to the market noticed their goods spoiling faster than usual. Even the small goods and chickens began to fall ill without reason. Some died overnight, others stopped eating. The villagers began to panic. "Maybe it is Amaka," someone said at the market. The words hung in the air. Nobody spoke immediately after. But then another voice agreed. "Yes, maybe it is her curse that brings this." Before long, even the ones who had accused her most loudly began to wonder, what if the evil they feared was bigger than a single girl? By that time, Amaka had mostly stayed inside her house. She no longer went to the stream during the day. She avoided the market. She did not greet anyone when she had to leave the house. Her stepmother had not come near her since the first confrontation, afraid of her own shame and whatever might follow. The fear in the village grew heavier. Children became sick with fever, some refusing to eat. Parents ran from hut to hut, looking for help, finding none. Goats and cows that once grazed peacefully collapsed. The river, which usually gave life, had water that smelled strange. And Amaka, she watched it all from the doorway. She had begun to notice the strange things happening in the village.
That was when she realized something. The sickness, the dying animals, the failing crops, it was not just misfortune. It was coming from something bigger. Something connected to her, yes, but not her fault. And still, nobody cared to ask questions. The villagers were too busy trying to protect themselves from a threat they did not understand. The same incident continued to befall the people of Amaka, until one day, an elderly man in the community, Elder Tinobu, suggested that the village and its people be cleansed to ward off evil in the land, that Amaka should be forced to confess or face punishment. The villagers nodded in agreement and decided that the next Nkwo market day be used for cleansing of the village. The day the village had chosen to cleanse itself arrived with a heavy sky. Dark clouds hung low, and the wind carried a chill that made everyone shiver. Amaka was dragged to the center of the square. She was weak, her body trembling from hunger and fear. Her hair hung loose over her shoulders, her wrapper dirty from weeks of staying mostly inside. She looked small and fragile, but there was a quiet fire in her eyes that no one had noticed before. The elders stood around her, serious, hands clasped. They had prepared chants, prayers, and rituals. The villagers circled them, waiting for the moment when Amaka would be judged. "Speak the truth now," Elder Okonkwo said, "or accept your punishment." Amaka's lips were dry. She did not answer at first. She had nothing to beg for. She had nothing to hide. She only had the truth, and it burned inside her like fire. Then suddenly, it was as if a spirit possessed her. Then she responded with a loud and firm voice. "You want to blame me for what is happening in this village?" she said, her voice trembling at first, then steady. "You want someone to pay for your fear. You think I am the curse, but it is not me." The villagers gasped. The elders looked at her with surprise, eyes narrowing. Amaka raised her hands. "Do you remember what happened years ago? Someone was buried in the forest alive. The sacrifice you all made to protect your wealth, to protect your families, to protect your power. You elders sacrificed an innocent pregnant woman without the villagers knowing. You all thought no one else saw what you did, but the land will swallow you all." Her voice grew louder, stronger. People stepped back. Some clutched their heads, murmuring, "That blood," Amaka continued, "was innocent, and it has returned. It has come back not as memory, but as judgment. And now the land refuses to give you food. The rivers have turned against you. The children are sick. The animals are dying, and all your secrets are rising to the surface." A hush fell. Even the elders could not speak. They shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. They had not expected this. Amaka's voice became colder. "Do not look at me as the cause. Look at yourselves. Your hands are not clean. You built your fear on lies. You buried the truth, and now the truth has found a way to speak." Some villagers began to cry. Some ran from the square. Others stayed frozen, staring at her as if she had become someone else entirely. Her stepmother fell to her knees, covering her face. She could no longer claim ignorance. She had known, in some corner of her mind, that something terrible had been done before Amaka was born.
Amaka did not lower her voice. She continued, naming names, recounting the sacrifices, the secret deals, the hidden crimes that had never been spoken aloud. Every word cut deeper than any slap, any curse, any accusation the village had thrown at her. By the time she finished, there was silence. Then she regained herself. She stood there, surprised as to why everyone was staring at her and crying. Dear viewer, I know you must be confused as to what happened. What happened here is that a ghost possessed Amaka, the ghost of a pregnant woman who was buried alive years back by elders of the village for money, protection, and power. The village had brought its own judgment upon itself, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. By afternoon, the sky darkened and winds began to howl across Amaka. The trees bent as if bowing under a weight nobody could see. The elders who had once spoken with authority looked around in fear. Suddenly, there was a fire outbreak. Smoke rose from thatched roofs as flames spread faster than anyone could control. People ran from their houses screaming, grabbing whatever little they could carry. Some fell to the ground, coughing, their eyes wide with terror. Then the livestock, goats, cows, chickens, animals that had survived for years, collapsed one by one. No one could explain it. Parents clutched their kids tightly, but it was no use. Fever, weakness, and cries filled the air. Some children could not move, and some lay still, staring at the sky, as if they already knew what was coming. Amaka stood in the square. She was weak, her body trembling from hunger and exhaustion, but she did not run. She watched quietly as the village unraveled. Every scream, every cry, every roar of the wind seemed to echo the truth she had spoken. The elders who had judged her first fell where they stood. Elder Okonko, Mama Nkem, Elder Tobias, all gone before anyone could reach them. The people who had once accused her had no answers, only fear and shame. Homes burned completely. The fire spread from one house to another. The wind carried ash into the fields. The river churned with mud and debris. The animals that had survived ran into the forest, or they did not run at all. Before the following morning, the village of Amaka was gone. Not a single hut remained. No children's laughter. No footsteps across the dirt paths, no smoke from cooking fires, no voices at all. Only silence. The land had swallowed everything. And Amaka, she was there, standing among the ruins, her body weak, her stomach round, her eyes full of tears. She couldn't speak. She only looked at what remained and understood something that nobody else could. She was not the cause. She had never been. She was the consequence. The consequence of hidden sins, of secret sacrifices, of pride that could not admit its own wrongs. The wind carried her story. It swept through the trees and farmlands, over hills and rivers. Villages far from Amaka would hear the tale in whispers, carried by travelers, by traders. And the story would always be the same. The village had destroyed itself. And the lesson would not be forgotten. The fields remained empty. The houses would never be rebuilt. The river ran silently. Only the wind moved. And in its quiet, it whispered a single truth for all to hear. Amaka was never the curse. She was the consequence. The consequence of fear, pride, and lies that could no longer hide.